Significant news to follow if you're a Houston Texan fan. Significant news to follow if you're just an NFL fan in general. CJ Stroud, the Ohio State quarterback, he's yet to declare for the NFL draft. And there's some rumblings, Cody, that Stroud might stick around and stay another year in school. He's yet to officially declare. He has until January 16th, 3 days from right now, to make a decision on whether or not he is leaving Ohio State and declaring for the draft. And let's think about this from a variety of different angles here. If he stays, the Texans blowing the number one pick in the draft last week looks 1,000 times worse, because now if Bryce Young is the only top guy in this class, the consensus number one guy, and there's no guy that you could even compare to him like CJ Stroud was being compared to Bryce Young, all of a sudden the Chicago Bears are about to get unprecedented level offers potentially to leapfrog the Houston Texans for another team to come up and take Bryce Young. This could be a disaster for the Houston Texans.
I hope it's a much ado about nothing situation, but when Marvin Harrison Jr. tweets and then deletes a tweet that led people to speculate the CJ Stroud status, it's a little weird. Harrison Jr. tweeted earlier today a kind of like a laughing emoji and a wink emoji, and there's no significant news for Ohio State. I mean, I guess Brian Hartline being the offensive coordinator, but that doesn't get Marvin Harrison Jr. tweeting.
You think that's part of it, though? Brian Hartline, who was their receivers coach, highly respected. Today, Ohio State announced he's their new offensive coordinator.
He turned down a bunch of different opportunities to leave Ohio State. He's now the offensive coordinator. Marvin Harrison Jr.'s tweeting. I think there's a solid conversation to be had from CJ Stroud's side about, like, hey, if I stick around, what's it worth to me financially? If I play well, can I be the top pick in next year's draft? And it's a worthwhile conversation. He's got 3 days to figure it out. I don't know what the financial ramifications are. Obviously, an NFL contract is going to be more than whatever he gets with the 1 year of NIL money that Ohio State's going to pay him. The Ohio State boosters, or however you want to phrase it's going to pay him.
You think that could that be the holdup, though? The NIL people at Ohio State, boosters.
He's waiting for the paycheck to clear?
They're just coming up with how much money they could give him to stay in school for one more year. Maybe he really wants to win a national title.
Well,
it matters to him that much, and he knows if he waits. I can't even say if he waits, he's definitely the first pick next year, because next year Caleb Williams is coming out.
That's one of the conversations, though, about CJ Stroud's time at Ohio State. He's going to have played quarterback at Ohio State, had some of the most talented Ohio State teams, and they'll have never played for a national championship with him there, and they'll have never beat Michigan with him there. Like, as him as the starting quarterback, they've never beat Michigan, and they haven't played for a national championship. Whatever that matters to C.J. Stroud, maybe it matters a lot, and maybe he wants to come back and change that. And it'd be a whole hell of a lot easier to change it if Jim Harbaugh bails on Michigan and gets out of there.
Wow, so the vindictiveness of Stroud to stick around another year and turn down the chance to be maybe the number one pick in the draft. We don't know. Certainly in the top 5.
We would speculate today the lowest he's going is 4.
Yes.
The Colts. The Colts at 4. That'd be the lowest. And even if the Colts, okay, we're not in love with him, somebody may come up to the Colts pick. But the lowest he'd be going is 4.
He's not leaving the top 5.
Right.
We could say that.
Okay, not leaving the top 5. You know, pretty much guaranteed top 5 pick, and he may go back to college. Now, don't get me wrong. He's going back to a great situation, one of the best situations in football. He's going to play with maybe the best player in college football next year, Marvin Harrison Jr. And they already had tremendous chemistry. There'd be a bunch more talent that they add in there. Yeah, they lose this guy or that guy to the NFL. Who cares? It's Ohio State.
Yeah.
There's a bunch more future NFLers right behind him. It's an interesting decision. From a Texans perspective, all of a sudden, that 12th overall pick, the extra capital that you have from the Deshaun Watson trade, that may be necessary to go get Bryce Young and go to the Bears and say, hey, we want the number 1 pick.
I just don't think you could do that. Like, optics-wise, even though that, BK would be like, well, if you think Bryce Young's that good, it doesn't matter. You got to do it. There's no way the Texans would do it. There's no way they would take the chance of forever being clowned on for trading away their extra first-round pick to move up just one spot so they could get a quarterback they could have had all along if Nick Caserio basically made sure the Texans were to lose that game to the Indianapolis Colts.
You're not thinking right about the future if you're worried that much about the past.
I much rather trade the 12th pick for Sean Payton and take my chances on him figuring out this organization than trade that 12th pick to potentially have to move up one spot to take a chance on Bryce Young, who's not a lock to be great.
I mean, that's why the number 2 pick was interesting when we believe CJ Stroud is for sure going. Now that there's some question, like the number 2, like, okay, if Young you get traded up for in front of and Young goes, there's an option that's within shouting distance of Bryce Young from a prospect standpoint. We went through McShay's top board, his big board yesterday. Will Levis is 13. Anthony Richardson's 32 on the big board. Who's the quarterback next year? Yeah, Sean Payton be great. I don't want to watch Sean Payton coach Davis Mills for a year. I don't want to watch Sean Payton coach Jimmy Garoppolo.
And let's be real. This could impact whether or not Sean Payton even wants to come here.
Sure.
If Stroud stays in school, and once again, if you're just tuning in, he has till January 16th to make his final decision. He's yet to do it, and there's some rumblings that he's leaning towards potentially staying at Ohio State. If C.J. Stroud does not make a decision on the draft by Monday, all of a sudden, does Sean Payton definitely want to come to the Texans when he doesn't know if they're going to be able to get Bryce Young, assuming he likes Bryce Young? Maybe he likes C.J. Stroud, and that was going to be the guy he'd want if he came here to Houston. Now we can't have him. So, this is not a dire situation necessarily. Obviously, we don't know for sure if he's staying, but all these scenarios we're going through, none of them are positive for the Texans.
My gut tells me he's going to declare for the draft just because I don't anticipate that Ohio State planned for C.J. Stroud to stick around for a third year. Now, that guy wants to stick around for a third year. You try to figure it out because he probably gives you the best chance to win, more so than somebody who's been sitting behind him. But that drastically changes Ohio State for a couple of years because you probably have had somebody sitting behind C.J. Stroud ready to go, thinking that that guy was going to be probably a 2-year player, and then out, he's going to the NFL, and then you probably had somebody else lined up after that. So it changes things. We know guys like to play sooner than ever. Heck, C.J. Stroud being able to come back for his second season cost them Quinn Ewers, which at the time was thought to be one of the best quarterback prospects. Now he plays at Texas, Now, obviously, C.J. Stroud this year was better than Quinn Ewers, but, it could cost them multiple quarterbacks in the rankings and in the next couple of years if Stroud comes back. So I don't know if you necessarily have planned for that if you're Ohio State, but also, do you say no if he tells you he wants to come back? Why would you say no to C.J. Stroud?
No, you couldn't. You have a chance to win a national title with that guy. I mean, you made the playoffs with him this year, and he was excellent in that game against Georgia.
Yeah.
Against the team that ended up winning the national title game 65-7, C.J. Stroud played maybe the best game of his life.
It gets a much more uncomfortable situation sitting at the number 2 overall pick if there's no C.J. Stroud available. So the next 3 days are, add in 3 days of additional anxiety as you think about who the Texans' next quarterback is going to be, especially if C.J. Stroud, before the 16th, decides he's coming back.
This is a game changer. And we'll know by Monday. By the time we sign on the air, Monday at 3 o'clock, we'll know. But this is just unbelievable. 713-780-ESPN's the number. C.J. Stroud could stay in school. Texans fans, how does that make you feel? Let's go to Damien on the East End. Damien, you're first up. Start us off this segment.
Hey guys, love the show. I was like, so if CJ Stroud doesn't declare for the draft, what's going to be the plan B option for the Houston Texans to move forward, or either go through free agency or move up for the number 1 pick? I'll hang up and listen.
If you feel like you can't move up, if you're along the lines of what Jake said, where it costs too much, or you look too silly, or a combination of both. At number 2, you got to draft Will Anderson.
You got to go best player available, and you got to hope to God that you have a plan to find your long-term answer at quarterback maybe the following year.
Because it's worth noting, by the time the draft gets here, okay?
Or I would trade out, Cody. I don't even know if I would take – I would trade out and try and just stockpile as many picks as possible.
By the time the draft gets here, all the QB movement of veteran guys is over.
Yep.
Jimmy Garoppolo signed in free agency. If Carr gets released, he signed in free agency. Like, so you've
Lamar Jackson's been traded if it's going to happen.
Yeah, Lamar Jackson's been moved if he's been moved. Anybody else that's a quarterback, Aaron Rodgers movement,
Tom
whatever.
Brady's on a new team.
Exactly.
Yep.
All the quarterback movement from a veteran standpoint is over by the time the draft gets there. So if you go into the draft and you're sitting there and Chicago's still got number 1, but there's a bunch of teams whispering that they're going to trade up, and then by the time Roger Goodell walks out there Thursday night and he tells us that the Indianapolis Colts are on the clock, or the Seattle Seahawks are on the clock, or the Washington Commanders are on the clock, and it's like, okay, scramble. What do you do? Are you trading back from 2? who's trading up for Will Levis to 2? You don't have to do that. You know, the Bears sit there at 4 and they trade back again because maybe somebody wants Will Levis. Like, nobody's trading up to 2 for Will Levis. Like, I don't know that you have a lot of partners to trade back from 2. So, okay, are you drafting Will Anderson? Are you drafting Jalen Carter? Are you drafting somebody else? Is there maybe – there's not an offensive lineman you're taking that high?
This is a disaster if this plays out the way